Right, thank you everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the press conference of Africa Climate Action Initiative and the True Animal Protein Price Coalition. I'm honored here today to share this table with my colleagues Twinto Mugangu from Akai and Sabela Haye from GAIN. And I'm also honored here today to share our declaration on making the polluter pay and ensuring a just transition by pricing agricultural emissions. And this declaration is supported by the countries of Equatorial Guinea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, as well as Uganda, and this coalition of NGOs, of whose most notably are Plant-Based Treaty, Resilient 40, and Youth and Environment Europe. And these are our demands. We believe that COP29 and UNFCCC conferences thereafter can only be successful if the closing statement includes transitioning away from animal protein overconsumption according to national or global dietary guidelines by implementing greenhouse gas emission pricing mechanisms in agri-food systems. Furthermore, it should urge the EU Commission, OECD countries, and China to lead the way towards harmonized greenhouse gas emission pricing systems in their agri-food. Finally, it urges the use of at least 20% of these revenues of above-mentioned pricing mechanisms to finance the loss and damage fund. And this declaration goes twofold. It then tries to counter the overconsumption and the excess consumption of animal proteins in countries across the globe, as well as fix the shortage of climate finance, especially concerning the loss and damage fund. So why is this important? You can see by this map that global meat consumption is characterized by a great discrepancy. This discrepancy is as follows. Developing countries eat only 26.6 kilograms per capita a year on average of global meat consumption. OECD consumes 71.4 and China 62 kilograms. Furthermore, the trend is also worrying, where the global herd size is trended to increase from 37 to 46% until 2050. This means that our current food systems are incompatible with the Paris Climate Accords and especially the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. So pricing these agricultural emissions is very important. 1/3 of all our global emissions are from our food systems, and this is also not distributed equally. This is mainly caused by animal proteins. As you see on this list is topped by beef, lamb, cheese, pig meat, and eggs, all animal proteins. And it's therefore no surprise that vegan diets are projected to have only half of the climate footprint as a meat lover's diet does. And furthermore, by pricing these products which emit so much greenhouse gas emissions, namely freshwater withdrawals. Even though nuts are also high on this list, it is still led by cheese, beef, lamb, mutton, and other animal proteins. Secondly, deforestation. 41% of deforestation between 2005 and 2013 was caused by the pasture expansion for beef. Of this, majorly Brazilian beef and the Amazon deforestation. Furthermore, biodiversity loss. Of the 28,000 species threatened with extinction, agriculture threatens 24,000 of them. Furthermore, the global rate of species extinction today is higher than the average rate over the past 10 million years. And this is mainly due to the vast difference in land use between animal protein consumption as well as less animal protein consumption, as is shown here. Most importantly, pasture land allows for more than half of our land use for food. But also, from the cropland, 43% of that land is used to feed animals. And therefore, it's logical that with less meat consumption, our land use for agriculture will decrease drastically. From only half with no beef or mutton to 3/4 if you go for a vegan diet. And this is mainly due to the food waste that happens when you transition plant-based proteins to animal proteins. Because eggs, the most efficient animal protein, is only 25% efficient, meaning 100 grams of vegetable proteins are needed for 25% or 25 grams of animal proteins. Whole milk, 24%, pork, 8.5%, and beef, 3.8%. And therefore, UNEP has also stated, if cereals were used for direct human consumption instead of animal feed, an extra 3.5 billion people could be fed. And this problem with our food systems has recently also received acknowledgement by the global sphere. The UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action has called for the shifting away from higher greenhouse gas emission practices to more sustainable production and consumption approaches. 162 countries committed to this. Secondly, recent reports from the FAO and the World Bank has also called for GHG emission pricing and true pricing in our food systems. So the urge to action is clear. And this is also why our declaration has so much support today. These are the conclusions on food systems. Animal protein overconsumption is a major cause of greenhouse gas emissions, freshwater withdrawals, deforestation, biodiversity loss, land use, and food shortage and malnutrition. More on that later. 162 countries are committed to change, and the transition is urged by FAO and World Bank. And we can use this urge and this action to gain finance, which is now in short demand, or short supply, I should say. Finance and COP29 are very important. The new collective quantified goals to be decided this year, which should be above 1 trillion USD, and the operationalization of the loss and damage fund is also on the schedule, which needs 400 billion USD per year. The potential revenue of emission pricing is, with this simple calculation, calculated as 168 billion USD per year. And even though this does not account for the price elasticity of demand, it is only a tax on meat, not other animal proteins. So the actual number is probably much higher. Now we will hear something about nutrition from Gain and Sarah Lahaye.
Thank you. I will speak a little bit about the health considerations around reducing excess animal protein consumption and moving to more moderate consumption levels. According to the WHO and FAO, there are 4 key principles to a healthy diet. Adequate, so providing enough essential nutrients to prevent deficiencies and promote health without excess. Balanced in energy intake and energy sources, including fats, carbohydrates, and protein, to promote healthy weight growth and disease prevention. Moderate in consumption of foods, nutrients, and other compounds associated with detrimental health effects. And diverse, including a wide range of nutritious foods within and across food groups to favor nutrient adequacy and consumption of other health-promoting substances. What this points to is that no single food or food group should be consumed in excess because it disrupts and prevents the ability to have an adequate, balanced, moderate, and diverse diet. So let me expand on each of these points a little bit as it relates specifically to animal protein consumption. For adequacy, with protein, there's frequently a misunderstanding about what our body needs, a belief that more is better, and this is perhaps one driver behind excess animal protein consumption. In fact, the WHO recommends that 10 to 15% of total energy intake be protein, with then 15 to 30% being fat and 45 to 75% being carbohydrates. For protein, that breaks down to approximately 50 to 70 grams of protein per day, or 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, with slight variation, of course, based on one's age, physiological needs, and lifestyle. In upper income countries, which currently consume approximately 200 grams of meat per person per day, on top of consuming other foods that include protein, this results inevitably in excess intake of protein. Consuming higher or lower portions of energy from protein, fat, and carbohydrates can have many negative health consequences. For protein specifically, excess consumption of animal protein that exceeds adequacy limits can cause metabolic burden, especially for the kidneys. Excess consumption also compromises the ability to consume adequate quantities of other health-promoting foods with their own micronutrient profile, which then in turn puts adequate intake of those micronutrients at risk. On micronutrients, which include all of your essential vitamins and minerals, animal source foods are a rich source of many critical micronutrients. However, like with other macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, there are negative health effects associated with excess consumption of some micronutrients. For example, excess consumption of iron, which is high in red meat in particular, has been associated with risk of cardiovascular disease. On moderation, the FAO and WHO in their healthy diets guidance say we should only moderately consume foods that are associated with detrimental effects. They have found that high intakes of red meat in particular are associated with increased risk of several diseases, and evolving evidence suggests that consumption of processed red meat, even at low levels, can have deleterious health effects. The Eat Lancet Commission has also found that overconsumption of meat in Western diets is a significant contributor to poor health and increases a person's risk of becoming overweight, obese, or developing certain non-communicable diseases. Plant-based sources of protein do not have the same association with negative health impacts. There's growing evidence that substituting animal-based with plant-based foods is associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality. And therefore, FAO and WHO note that in places that have high meat consumption, switching to more plant-based sources of protein may be preferable to decrease risk of cardiovascular disease. It's for this reason that the FAO guidance on healthy, sustainable diets notes that diets should include whole grains, nuts, legumes, and an abundance and variety of fruits and vegetables, and notes that diets can, but not must, include moderate amounts of eggs, dairy, poultry, and fish, and small amounts of red meat. On diversity, in upper-income countries, there is generally decent access to a wide range of protein sources, including both plant and animal-based proteins. In line with the overall principle of diversity, protein should thus be sourced from a diverse range of foods. If one considers splitting their 50 to 75 grams of protein across a diverse range of sources, the inevitable result is generally modest intake of meat. You simply cannot achieve the diversity that your body and your gut microbiome needs if you disproportionately consume from one category of food. And this points to the broader principle of diversity. When we consume one food category in excess, we frequently underconsume other categories, which can offer important health benefits, such as essential vitamins and minerals or dietary fiber. Right now, in countries with excess consumption of meat, there's generally inadequate consumption of whole grains, nuts and seeds, and fruits and vegetables, simply because there isn't room in the diet for these foods when a disproportionate amount of the diet comes from meat. However, these foods offer really important essential health benefits, and we need space in our diets to adequately consume them. I think I've made clear, and this goes without saying, that this is a conversation about excess consumption. It is primarily in high-income countries where a diverse range of other healthy foods are available. The role that animal source foods play in meeting nutrient needs in lower-income countries is different because the food environment is different, generally with less access to a diverse range of foods. It is in these places that animal source foods are particularly important in meeting critical micronutrient and amino acid needs. However, I think even in these places, one would never recommend consuming animal protein at the levels that it is consumed in upper income countries today. To conclude, and one thing I always like to point out is I think it just makes a lot of sense that in our two homes, our planet and our bodies, they share a remarkable amount in common. Generally speaking, what is good for planet Earth is also good for our bodies. The foods that are good for soil, such as nitrogen-fixing legumes, offer incredible human and environmental health benefits. They are a rich source of protein, they're high in iron and other critical micronutrients, they're rich in fiber to help our gut microbiome flourish, but they also fix nitrogen in our soil, offering benefits to the environment as well. If we adhere to the principles of a healthy diet, we can also keep our food system within planetary boundaries while having a positive effect on key agricultural environmental indicators like agrobiodiversity and land use. Thank you.
Thank you for these comments on nutrition, and thank you also for emphasizing that it's not our meaning to limit animal protein consumptions in countries where this is a vital part of their diet. I'll now give the word to Twinto Mugangu from the Africa Climate Action Initiative to give some words on their process and action, and also the importance of this declaration for their organization.
Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of ACAI, the African Climate Action Initiative. So we represent the African continent, and I'm actually from the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And as William said, we are among the first four African countries who have already signed on this initiative, because we will be the beneficiary of these activities. The loss and found, the loss and damage fund when it is established. So for a small history, we started actually in 2019 as a diaspora in Canada, and we were only at that time 4 countries, Anglophone countries of Africa, and then the effort has now moved to cover 20 countries of Africa, and our approach is to go beyond and cover all 53 countries of Africa as soon as possible. Now we are registered as an NGO in Ghana, and we have an office there ever since 2023. Our mission is generally to bring about sustainable development in Africa, especially to make people in Africa become self-reliant, especially using agricultural products and making a better living out of agriculture. Especially for the local community, women, children who are really being hit hard by global warming. Our vision is to bring about regenerative and climate resilient Africa through a clean agriculture production technique and low resource consumption behavior, following traditional African experiences. So we are working under four pillars. We want to develop upstream, that means bottom up, with the participation of partners to increase capacity to locally led adaptation for sustainable development with resilience. The second pillar, we want to inform, foster, and assist in implementing natural resource management policies by promoting climate smart tools and the approaches adapted and acceptable to local communities in Africa. The third pillar, we want to increase the climate action through human and financial resources mobilization, awareness raising, knowledge enhancing, exchanging and sharing among local and global communities. And then we are there to hear what you help this initiative to really to sign on this making a tax in the OECD countries so that we benefit from it in Africa. We need a streamlined loss and damage fund to be really operationalized as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tinto, for these words on the declaration. Then for one more time, our demands. They are that we believe that COP29 and UNFCCC conferences thereafter can only be successful if the closing statement includes transitioning away from animal protein overconsumption according to national or global dietary guidelines by implementing greenhouse gas emission pricing mechanisms in agri-food systems. We urge the EU Commission, the OECD and China to lead the way towards these harmonized pricing mechanisms. And we also urge the use of at least 20% of the revenues of above-mentioned pricing mechanisms to finance the loss and damage fund so that we can pay for the damages done by our past consumption of meat and animal proteins. This is why we want to make the polluter pay, and signing this declaration is possible until Monday, 18 November, 1700 UTC. And if you scan the QR code on screen right now, there's extra information regarding the declaration, the full declaration itself, as well as the possibility to sign and the full list of signatories. I think we now open the floor to questions. If there are any, please ask them, and we can answer.
Must be battery.
Okay. I'm asking this question within the context of the EU farmer protests that happened earlier this year. In recognition of those protests, I think it's important to comprehend the ideological weight that livestock farming and farming in general has within global North societies. There are a lot of fantasies that are attached to that. With that in mind, are there concerns among your organizations that such an initiative would incur a substantial reactionary response from members of these societies, be they politicians or citizens, that might harm other adaptation and mitigation initiatives in the future?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I would first like to say that I think the risk of backlash and reactionary response to such policies is always a possibility, no matter what the policy says in this case. TAPP Coalition as a company lobbies in the European Union to not only use the money by the revenue of greenhouse gas emission pricing, not only use it for the loss and damage fund, but also use it to give a roadmap to farmers themselves to help them with our green transition and to therefore subsidize ecological farming and the consumption of vegetables and greens. I think currently there's the problem with there not being a clear roadmap, especially in Europe with the switching political climate. And therefore, it's also a lot of uncertainty for farmers in Europe, and therefore they're also causing protests. I'm not sure whether this is also happening in other global north countries, because I myself am from the Netherlands, but this is what I would like to share. I hope this answers your question. Is there another question? Okay, thank you very much then for your attention, and hope to see you during this conference again. And Friday we have a side event also covering this declaration at 5, at 3 till 4:30, I mean, in the side event room 2. So hope to see you there.